We're going to dive deep with one of our favorite epidemiologists, Nick Holscher, and we're going to talk about the mRNA shots and how they've been linked to bone cancer, bone marrow, reprogramming within weeks. This is a very exciting topic because we talk about more mRNA technology.
Yeah, as each day goes by, more and more studies come out that show just the horrible consequences of the mRNA injection campaigns. Now, the most recent study looked at patients, right, that received Pfizer mRNA injections, and all 7 of these patients developed leukemia. So, cancer of the blood forming tissues. They developed leukemia within 2 months, all of these patients, and they looked at their metabolics of their bone marrow. So basically how the bone marrow was operating, and they found that in these Pfizer injected people with leukemia, that it actually matched the profile of normal leukemia in unvaccinated individuals, but with distinct differences, right? So there was about four major differences in the metabolic profile with the mRNA injected leukemia participants compared to the unvaccinated leukemia participants. So this indicates that these mRNA shots literally reprogram the metabolics of your bone marrow, resulting in leukemia. And this just corroborates now about 20 other studies now that indicate that these shots are indeed carcinogenic.
So now let me ask you, the viewers are going to want to know, is this specifically Pfizer or is this all mRNA technology, meaning Moderna, the Johnson & Johnson? Is this mRNA in broad, or is there specifically something going on with the Pfizer version?
I think it's both. A lot of the time the studies will pick just one of the mRNA shots, but we can assume that very similar effects will happen with Moderna as well. Because they do operate on extraordinarily similar platforms, right? They both induce the body to produce the toxic full-length spike protein, and so yeah, we would expect that Moderna could have similar results here, but obviously testing would be needed. But regarding the Pfizer versus Moderna debate, a recent study actually was put on the preprint server about a month ago with Florida Surgeon General Joe Ladapo as the senior author. And they actually found that those who received Pfizer, among 1 million Florida residents, those who received Pfizer had about a 36% higher risk of all-cause mortality compared to Moderna recipients. So that study indicates that Pfizer could possibly be more dangerous, more deadly, but that needs more investigation.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the vaccine induced AIDS part, because I know there was a lot of people that were coming out saying that these COVID shots were going to, within 5 to 10 years, everybody was going to be testing positive for some form of AIDS, or their body would be showing similar symptoms to those who suffer from AIDS. Now that's directly linked to the immune system, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Autoimmune deficiency, right? So basically, your body's immune system just breaks down, becomes compromised, and with specifically when you induce mRNA injections into the body, your body will start to attack itself, and what will happen is what's called IgG4 class switching with repeated booster shots. That means your immune system's literally reprogrammed, starts producing useless antibodies that don't prevent infection, and in fact increase your risk of infection, increase your risk of cancer and autoimmune diseases. And this has been documented now in many studies. One that followed mRNA recipients over the course of their like 4 boosters, and they confirm that the immune system does indeed become severely dysregulated by these shots.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. So, what are these people? What can they do? We have to be able to offer some type of hope, and I believe that Power that made the body can heal the body. I think God put everything here on earth that we need. Sometimes we make mistakes and we go injecting things that were made by man. I don't think God ever intended for us to have self replicating mRNA technology into our body, but there's got to be some hope. What's on the other side of the bridge to healing?
Yes, there is hope. There is hope. And, every day more and more studies are coming out. Here at the McCullough Foundation, we're trying to study solutions to this crisis of injury and disability. But what's shown the most promise, I would say, so far, and it's been confirmed now in two studies, and it's really been confirmed over the past few decades for many different ailments, is vitamin D, sunlight, right? Two studies now. One of them found that when you raise your vitamin D levels to adequate levels, your chance of death, of hospitalization from vaccine-induced myocarditis is drastically lessened. And so your outcomes are much better from vaccine injury, according to that study, when you have proper vitamin D levels. And all of the myocarditis patients had inadequate levels. And so that's probably expected because they have this pathology and that will deplete their levels. So vitamin D is absolutely critical. Also, another study found it improves chronic fatigue syndrome, post-vaccination syndrome, when you raise those levels to adequate levels, as well as all-cause mortality. About a decade ago, a study came out, a meta-analysis, and found that adequate vitamin D levels drastically decrease all-cause mortality compared to when it's inadequate. So absolutely critical, sunlight, and then obviously proper nutrition, proper exercise. You do not want to be sitting, on your chair for hours on end with terrible blood circulation when we have these spike pathologies now circulated in the population. You want optimal blood flow, and one way to do that obviously is exercise. But then there's also nutraceuticals, and we know that vitamin C is absolutely critical in combating some of this oxidative stress, as well as all the other vitamins and minerals that you want to ensure an adequate amounts. And then we have as well is protein degrading enzymes. These are natural compounds, and we actually have a paper published on this. It's McCullough protocol based spike detoxification. It's nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin, three safe compounds that have shown promise in the test tube and now in N of 1 trials. So in these case reports showing improvements in degrading the spike protein and resolving these blood clotting pathologies.
And one of the most important things that I think is very important, and if you can chime in on this, I'm not sure if you're, an expert in this field, but I always try to tell people, there's different times of the day. If you're going to be supplementing, it is better to get your vitamins from the food that you're eating, right? So if you're
Yes.
supplementing, what you should be supplementing your body is what your body is deficient in, right? And a lot of people can do that with very inexpensive tests. They can do blood tests, micro gut biome test. There's a methylated test you can get for like $500 or $600. And some people say it's absolutely the best test you can get because then you just start supplementing only what your body's deficient in. But I think that when more people understand who, what, when, where, and why when it comes to supplements. And again, today is take your daughter to work day. So I've got baby girl here. So guys, in the Maha movement, that's my Maha baby. Vitamin D3, right? You want to take that with your largest meal of the day. Usually you want to take that with a fat soluble. So if you can't take that, I've always recommended if you get a clean source of olive oil, you could take a little bit of olive oil or a healthy fat like an avocado oil. Take your D3 with something that's fat so it gets further into the tract, gets down into your gut, you're able to absorb it. Vitamin C, I always think that you should take that in the morning because some people can convert vitamin C into energy. So if you don't want to have, crazy time trying to fall asleep, don't take 5,000 milligrams of vitamin C right before you go to bed. But another one that's really good is multivitamins. So when you're getting a lot of multivitamins, make sure that you're getting a multivitamin that's very high in the vitamins that you're already deficient in, right? And again, I do believe, Nick, that when you go to the pharmaceutical doctor, right, you're doing allopathic medicine. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the prescriptions that they're giving you is really just a Band-Aid for a greater issue. Like Pfizer and these big companies, they're not curing diseases. They're just reversing or helping ease some of the symptoms. And very much just like what you were saying, nattokinase, vitamin D, vitamin C, when you're using those supplements, even though they are better than prescriptions, it's also just a band-aid. What we need to get to is the root cause. What are you excluding from your diet? Is it like you just said? Are you sitting around all day on the couch with your knees clocked up and you're not getting outside and exercising? You're not getting movement. You're not getting enough sunlight. Those are all very, very important things. Now, when you start talking about vaccine injury, what are your thoughts on doing things like cold plunges and far infrared saunas and kind of getting the lymphatic system moving? Because is the lymphatic system not one of our best friends when it comes to detoxing these things that have been injected into people?
Yes, you would definitely want a proper optimized lymphatic system for sure. When you have all these now novel toxins, frame shifted proteins, spike proteins circulating, yeah, those are definitely going to be helpful things, and nothing's going to hurt, right? These practices, such as cold plunging, such as infrared light, they have all obviously been shown to be highly beneficial to the human body under many circumstances. And so, none of this is going to harm you. Everything's going to count, everything's going to help. So, do as much as you can to help your body out, optimize its health. And you will face a less risk of harm from really any product.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Can you talk to us? Can you talk to us a little bit about diet? Right. I don't know if you guys have done any research on when people are vaccine injured, especially for the younger children with myocarditis. You've also recommended a couple supplements which can kind of help aid in the recovery. But what about food? Have you guys been putting any research into nutrition about the best kind of diet to stick to while you're recovering? Or, let's just talk about specifically mRNA technology. Is there any type of diet that is giving people a little bit of hope?
That's a great question. This hasn't been studied as far as I'm aware, at least in a published manuscript. But I would say to completely avoid all ultra processed foods, even processed foods if you can. If you are suffering from a vaccine injury, you do not want these pro inflammatory, toxic chemicals, toxic pesticides, toxic synthetic ingredients in your food, in your diet. It's only going to make things worse. Stick with natural products. Stick with if you want to go carnivore, right? You can try that. I don't know if that's going to specifically improve vaccine injury syndromes. It might, but fruits, vegetables to get your nutrients as well. Stick with, again, just stick with what was grown on the earth, not synthetic products, not toxic seed oils, none of that stuff. Avoid all the pro-inflammatory compounds if you can. Again, and that will improve the overall health of your body and thus improve your outcomes with vaccine injury.
Gotcha. Well, we want to give a little cheat sheet to those that are listening and anybody that wants to supplement. And again, we're not doctors. We're not telling you guys what you're deficient in, but some of our favorite supplements, at the Maha with Mike show, they all come from Global Healing. And obviously we bring on Nick here and they've got their whole line of supplements as well. But vitamin D3, you definitely want to take with a fat or any type of fat soluble, even if you take it with a shot of organic olive oil or you take some avocados. Fresh avocados better than the avocado oil. Same thing with olives. Great to eat the olives instead of the olive oil. But if it's something you're looking for quick, down the vitamin D3. And you could take that with lunch or dinner, preferably not with breakfast, just because you want it to be with the bigger meal. When it comes to vitamin C, I highly recommend in the morning or middle day. It doesn't matter whether you do it on an empty food, unless you're doing a high dose. If you do a high dose vitamin C, it can cause a little upset stomach or even can cause loose stools if you have too much vitamin C in the system. But your multivitamins you want to take with breakfast or lunch, and you want to try to take them with food, because taking a big variety, things with iron and all those other things that are mixed in with it, B12, B6, C, D3 all together. And if you're taking the D3, always consider taking it with K2. But for magnesium, that's one that I think, Nick, a lot of people are deficient in magnesium. And magnesium is now coming out to be so powerful for helping people sleep, but also with muscle aches and muscle cramps. Definitely, I would say in the morning on an empty stomach is when you want to take your iron. trust that from somebody who watched a mama bear go through pregnancy. You want to take that iron, and avoid a lot of coffee and tea when you're taking iron, so that way it gets a better absorption. And then if anybody's lacking in calcium, I highly recommend that you do if you're going above 500 milligram doses, you guys want to split those up. Maybe do one in the morning and then do one in the mid afternoon, and always take calcium with food. And if you are taking a probiotic, do it in the morning on an empty stomach. Take that before you eat anything. It can be, I think it's even better than before you have your morning coffee. Take the probiotics on an empty stomach. Talk to us a little bit about your supplement line, Nick, and what you guys are formulating. I'm very interested in learning more about the nattokinase. I hear that, and you guys are doing a good job pumping that on Instagram, because I get served up ads all the time. What are some of your customers saying about supplementing with this, especially for people who have been injured by the COVID-19?
Well, honestly, right now I'm not affiliated with the wellness company, so I'm not affiliated with any product line at the moment. But I would say that Dr. McCullough has had many patients come forth and indicate that their symptoms have significantly improved when they did start taking these nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin, because these, quite frankly, are potent degraders of the spike protein. We know that's the case. We know it reaches circulation in the body and thus should exert these effects and improve the blood flow, break up some clots that might be there. And so we have heard a lot of positive feedback. We've seen spike antibodies kind of go
Hmm.
down as people take this regimen. But we really do need like massive funds of studies on these compounds and many other compounds in improving vaccine injury syndromes, because it's really being ignored, right? And when I look at PubMed, like maybe every few months a study comes out on treating vaccine injured. It's so rare. So this has to be a huge focus, as millions of Americans have been injured by these products, unfortunately. And so, yeah, we do need to start moving forward with this.
So I don't know if you're very well versed in this realm, but I want to ask you, from what you've seen in the research that you've been seeing happening, and as far as we now know that these first couple cases that you were talking about were leukemia, which is obviously in the blood. Where do you think we'll be at in 10 to 15 years as far as chemotherapy? If Robert F. Kennedy and his team are focusing on all these natural ways to start increasing T cells, and they're putting more research into immunotherapy. I know that they're doing, Germany and France are leading the world right now in creating specific vaccines for cancer. My question to you is kind of like how we saw the old tube televisions disappear and the rotary phone dials are no longer here, but just in museums. Do you think that our generation or our children's generation will go back and be like, oh yeah, chemotherapy was that weird thing that they injected a bunch of people with and they all died?
Yeah, I think that's going to end up being the case. They're going to look back, I believe, maybe 30 years, 40 years. They'll look back at chemotherapy as a barbaric and kind of caveman like thinking of destroying the entire body to treat a cancer. We got to get away from this caveman like barbaric treatments that should just significantly damage every body system, right? We got to move towards targeted approaches and even towards natural compounds, like medicinal mushrooms, like cordyceps, like turkey tail mushroom. These have shown lots of promise, but also ivermectin and fenbendazole are also now, that's really gaining national attention now as possible treatments for cancer. And there's a lot of positive anecdotal reports now of people reporting remission after taking these products. And so there a recent study actually came out, systematic review of ivermectin and cancer. They found not only is it completely safe if people are undergoing conventional treatment, but it does show potent anti-tumor effects in the test tube via like 10 mechanisms. And so Yeah, we got to go to natural compounds. And yeah, in 40 years from now, I truly hope we're not still administering chemotherapy as the main form of treatment.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I don't know how well versed you are, but when it comes to ivermectin, I consider myself somewhat of a savant. So, I don't know if you want to take the floor or if I could take it for a second. Completely up to you.
Sure, go ahead.
So one of the things that we've noticed, and I know that during COVID, everybody just called ivermectin, it was the horse paste, right? They're like, oh, you're taking a horse dewormer. And that was their way of the liberal left was shutting down the potential benefits of ivermectin, correct? They were just demonizing it and calling it, a horse dewormer. But what we're actually starting to see happen is, even though this is what we call a repurposed drug, right? What's happening is you're seeing the inhibition of cell growth. So ivermectin is actually disrupting cell division, and it induces what's known as cell cycle arrest. And that's like an especially rapid dividing, like if you've got these, what they call these turbo cancers, right? And these dividing cells. But another thing that's important is what we call cell death. So it triggers apoptosis. So it can actually activate programmed cell death pathways, which in many cases, I know it was only in vitro and right now it's in animal studies, because you and I know you have to have hundreds of millions of dollars to do full blown human testing. So that's why people say that there's just not enough evidence until you get a guy like Joe Tippins, who was sent home to die and took fenbendazole with some CBD oil. And next thing you know, his tumors were gone that had spread through his body. But another thing that's really cool is it reduces drug resistance. So when people are using immunotherapy or even chemotherapy, when the research is showing that ivermectin is actually targeting proteins like I think it's glycoprotein, which it pumps the drugs out of the cells, but more importantly, it modulates the immune system. That is so important, because what happens is, I really don't think that cancer is the disease that they tell us. Instead, I think cancer is a wake-up call. I think cancer is trying to tell the body something is wrong. We found some of these cells, we've developed them, we've trapped them. We need you to do something different in your immune system. We need you to change your diet. We need you to exercise. We need you to start producing T cells so we can go in and we can disguise these. So now when you start finding that you could take ivermectin and fenbendazole for people with healthy livers, or people will also take minbendazole, which is very close but has its own pros and cons. But something that's really beautiful is how inexpensive this stuff is, Nick, compared to $300,000-$400,000 in allopathic care. And I don't think that there's any clinical studies that are going to be done immediately. I think it's going to be more word of mouth and people kind of doing trial and error. But when you look at Joe Tippins, this is somebody where chemotherapy had failed and they had basically sent him home to die. And it was his veterinarian who had recommended that he try the I think it was Panicure was the brand, but it was basically just a dog version of fenbendazole.
Yeah, and you just laid it out beautifully. It has immense promise. It shows immense promise in the test tube and immense promise in the limited human data that we currently have. And so, this is the work, these studies and large scale trials, those should be initiated as ASAP by our public health authorities, based on this extraordinarily positive evidence, because cancer is affecting so many people right now. It's one of the leading causes of death. Then you introduce about 70% of Americans took at least one dose of an immune dysregulating carcinogenic injection. And so we got to get on top of cancer ASAP as levels continue to rise in the younger populations as well as the older populations.
Well, and the other thing is when we start to cut things out of our diet that are naturally reducing, inflammation, and we run to these ultra processed foods, it's no wonder why they're so scared of ivermectin, because ivermectin has been very well linked to anti-inflammatory properties. So when you look at chronic inflammation and how it's been linked to cancer progression, you guys have to get out there. You need to exercise, go see your chiropractor weekly, and you guys have to stay away from the center of the death camp.